This is just one of over 40 master classes we get each and every year for our TennisCon events. So if you love today's lesson, you're going to be able to get access to secrets you're not going to see anywhere else on the internet when you register for TennisCon 8 today. Get your free pass. Go to tenniscon8.com after watching today's lesson. All right, let's dive right in.
So I'm super excited to be presenting at this year's TennisCon. And this topic we're going to talk about today is bigger backhands with better technique. We're talking about the one-handed backhand. So in this presentation, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to focus on to have bigger backhands with better technique. So let's get started. So how this presentation is going to work, first of all, is this. We're going to go through an overview of the main mechanical parts of the one-handed backhand. Make sure you have this big picture. Then we're going to dive in to what I consider probably one of the most or two most important things to making sure you have a solid backhand that's reliable, but you have better and bigger balls when you hit it. So what I mean by better is you have more reliable technique and you can hit the ball with more acceleration or spin or however else you want. So let's get started. The very first thing I want to talk about is the ready position and the grip. Whenever you get ready with a one-handed backhand, you want to start with the racket out in front. And I like to use my left hand, my non-dominant hand, if you're a right-handed player. Obviously, it's opposite if you're a left-handed player, but my non-dominant hand is going to be right here on the throat. The importance of this is because the non-dominant hand helps me do two things. It helps me find my grip, but it also helps me turn my racket when we talk about the unit turn. And this is so crucial if we're talking about preparing for the one-handed backhand. So, what grip should you use for the one-handed backhand? An easy way of finding it is just hold the racket all the way out extended where you would obviously be making contact. And this might be different. If you're on clay, your contact might be a little higher. If you're on a harder surface, your contact might be a little bit lower. But there's still no extremes. I'm not doing it up here and I'm not doing it way up here. Probably like straight in front of you and grab it with the racket on top or the knuckles on top. This should present you with an Eastern backhand grip, meaning that this knuckle here is on top and this back part of my hand is going to be slightly forward. And this gives you the best stability when you're holding the racket. Now, one other thing when you're holding the racket, it's really important that you have these markers on your hand to add more stability to when you're holding the racket. And what I mean by that, if you hold your hand out, we're talking about the two grip points, but this point right here on your thumb, if I push this forward, what you're going to notice is that if I push my opposite arm or my dominant hand forward, I can resist a little bit. And what you see a lot of players doing is cheating with this. What I mean by this is I'll hold the racket and hold the thumb here. We don't want to hold the thumb here because then it takes away our ability to come up on the ball a little bit and have the stability while we're doing it. What we want to do is have that come around and have this kind of hook part be against the racket. So, or behind the strings. So if you pay attention right here, where I'm holding the racket just like this hook part is here and it adds for that stability when I'm swinging through the ball. So that covers our grip and how we want to start. Now, one more thing about when we start. I personally believe that you want to start making sure that you have your forehand grip. We want to make sure this is binary. It's on or off. I see too many players a lot of times waiting in a continental grip, and so what they have to do, especially when returning serve, they have to choose, am I going to hit forehand, or am I going to hit a backhand, or am I going to hit with a continental grip and maybe slice it back? In some occasions, when you're returning serve, we just know the person's going to hit a really big ball, you might shift into a continental grip. But what I do recommend for you is to constantly have your racket in a forehand grip and use your non-dominant hand to switch the grip, which means you're just going to relax your dominant hand and allow your left hand to switch that grip over. Now let's talk about the stages of the one-handed backhand. We've just talked about the ready position. Well, another thing we want to do when we have a ready position is have a nice wide stance and making sure that our feet are at least a racket lengths apart. With this taken care of, the very first thing we want to do is talk about a unit turn. This is so important. You see all the pros doing it. So meaning that when we come down off of the split step, we're going to use that left hand and start to prepare the racket. Now this does a couple things. It prepares the racket in a way that allows me to track the ball, but it also starts the separation between my shoulders and my hips, which is a source of power that we're going to use later. By having this unit turn right here, it really starts to coil and get us ready. But this is a momentary stage while we're hitting the ball or getting ready to hit the ball. So you see a lot of players move in this phase right here, but as they start to get closer to the ball, they're going to get the racket back. Now the timing is so crucial here, and we're now switching from the unit turn to the actual backswing. So notice that there's a little bit of a separation here. My unit turn pretty much takes the racket halfway back, and my backswing takes the racket to here. And that is so important. The reason why it's important, because it helps us have timing and rhythm. And this is so important. Too many players, when they're getting ready to hit the ball, they wait too long in this position and they have to speed everything up and it's really rushed. Compared to where you see the pros, it's a momentary holding or pulling the racket back in this position, then they go to the rest of their swing, which makes it very easy for them to have this nice rhythm. So the other part of the unit turn is you want to make sure you're stepping out with your outside leg. I like to say it's like shaking hands. So if I was coming here to shake your hand, I would move in this fashion to come shake your hand. Just like if I was here, I would turn, and you see how my toe's facing this direction. Now it's really important that you have your toe face the direction because it helps you move to the ball and it'll help you get ready to hit the ball. You also may see if, let's say, the ball's coming at their body, what will happen is this foot will get behind the ball a little bit more by turning this way. Either way, you're probably doing most of your movement on your outside leg. And this covers most of the unit turn. So from the unit turn, we go back to taking the racket back in the swing. Now notice, when we're taking our racket back, we want the racket head high. This is another extra bonus to when we're creating more power, that by having the racket head high, it's gonna do a couple things. Having it higher allows the racket to use gravity to drop and create this rhythm of this racket going down, and we can use that to add that momentum to striking the ball. Another reason why having the racket high and having the left hand here pulling the racket allows us to help get the racket into the slot position. I call this the butt pull position. What I mean by butt pull position is you're gonna see the racket drop with the butt of the racket facing away from the court. So meaning that if I'm hitting the ball this way, you'll see the butt of the racket facing this way. The reason you're gonna see this is because it provides the most amount of leverage. Just think about it. If your hand's straight here and you're swinging, you don't get any extra leverage, meaning my hand and the racket are moving at the same rate. Now, when your racket's in this position, watch the difference. If I move my racket just a little bit, I'm moving it from here, but watch how much the head moves. This little movement from the hand now creates a lot of movement in the head. And that's why you can get more power by having this leverage position. So we're gonna go here from our swing and we're gonna start our downward motion, which just simply drops the racket. Another way of thinking about the downward motion is what I call the calf position, is that we go from the butt pull to the calf, laying the racket right on the edge of my calf. And so a really simple drill you could do at home is just simply split, turn, and get the racket high, and then lay the racket on the calf. And what we want to do is pull the racket down with the non-dominant hand. We're going to use that non-dominant hand here to push the racket to this position, and it allows us now to get under the ball. When we can get under the ball, now it allows us to swing up and get control by using spin. Yes, you can hit the ball flat or flatter, and when you do hit the ball flatter, the ball will penetrate through the court more, but it'll have less spin. I always advise having just a little bit of spin if you want some control compared to just hitting the ball purely flat. If you want to add more spin, you can do that by just making sure that your upward action as you pull forward is going to be steeper. Now, from here, we're going to all just turn our body, which we're going to go into greater detail because this is a very key point. We're going to turn my body, my hips, which is going to pull the racket into contact. At contact, we want to have this full extension, and you see almost this L shape here. We don't want to have the racket way over here. This is almost creating a straight line or an I shape. We want to have this L shape, and then from here, we're going to pull the racket up and around. Now, it's really important for our swing that you're not thinking of this position here to contact, and it makes perfect sense, is that we should be snapping our wrist here. We don't want to do this. Although we're not clamped down and just like holding it super tight, there is some play, but I'm not, when I'm pulling the racket, pulling my wrist forward. This is wristy, and I'm using a small muscles, or using the small muscle to hit the ball. What I want to do is think of the butt of the racket and I'm pulling my arm. Just by pulling my arm, and my arm's doing almost like a half a little circle around me, pulling my arm up and around. So it's coming around my body and up. You can see it from this angle as I'm pulling. I'm not just snapping the wrist forward, which keeps the hand in the same position. I'm pulling the racket up, and you can see, if you're watching instead of the racket head, my fist right here, how my fist is traveling this way and up, this way and up, to have this nice elongated finish. One thing you'll notice on a lot of finishes is that you'll see the strings pointing sideways. And these are the core fundamentals of having a great one-handed backhand. Now, let's get into those details about how can we create more racketed speed. What is the source of power for our one-handed backhand? Because this is so important. So many players have either weak one-handed backhands because they have incorrect technique. And what it does is it doesn't leverage your stroke, you're not using your body, and you don't know how to connect your swing and your body together to get maximum pull and racketed speed. And the key about racket speed is not just about hitting with more power. You can use the racket speed to hit with more spin and have more control, but equally, you can drive the ball and have more power. You have choice now, compared to not having any choice and just kind of either slicing the ball back or pushing the ball back. We don't want that. Now let's get to the really important parts about how you can create bigger and better backhands. Now we're gonna break this down into 3 different areas, and then we're gonna push it together, or bring it together. And that is steering, engine, and wheels. And it sounds really weird, it's like steering, engine, and wheels, but I like this analogy because it's kind of like the most important parts of a car. If you think of what are the most important parts of the car, is the engine, because you need the power, it's the steering, because it directs the power, and it's the wheels, because the wheels allow you to get in position. And honestly, if you don't have the right wheels, it's going to be harder for the car or use the power in a productive manner. So let's talk about the steering first. And the way I look at the steering is how we direct the ball, how we use our swing. There's a saying that I like to use that makes it really easy to remember, which is the racket face sends the ball and the path bends the ball. So if you go back to the fundamentals we talked about, starting from this position here, what we want to do is think about 2 things right here, which is the path and the racket face. First, we're going to talk about the path. The path of your swing is to go down to the calf like I talked about here and then pull the racket forward. The path creates the bend of the ball, meaning the spin. As I'm coming up, this is going to create topspin, making sure that I'm pulling the racket up. And so this is the part that's going to create topspin. Now, just by my swing alone, yes, I can hit the ball and I can put spin on it, but I'm not going to have a bigger backhand because I'm still using just my arm here. I haven't incorporated my body, which we're going to talk about in a second. But it's really important to understand a swing because not only does the swing create topspin, but the racket face at contact is going to create the direction in which the ball is going to go. So if you find yourself swinging right now and the ball will go in the net, what that means is the racket face is generally too close. If you find it going too high, it means the racket face is too open. You're going to have to adjust your racket face based on how steeply you come up and how high or how low you want the ball to go over the net. This is really crucial to understand because when you understand this, you can make adjustments to get the ball to go where you want, when you want, how you want it. And this is so important. And we haven't even talked about power yet because you have to understand the steering, how you direct the ball, because when we add in more power, guess what? You're just going to magnify and multiply whatever you're doing in the steering. So this is really important to understand. By getting under the ball, we're going to create the upward lift, which gives a spin. But then at contact, we're going to create the racket face, which creates how high or low or even left or right based on the timing we have. Now, one really important note, because I think a lot of players, when I say this, they start thinking, okay, I need to switch my grip to make sure I have the right racket face at contact. You don't want to switch your grip. What you want to do is hold that same position and just adjust slightly the wrist angle, okay? You'll see a lot of players with the wrist slightly up, but either way, you want this wrist angle to adjust, which now adjusts the racket face at contact and changes the direction of the ball. So now you understand the steering. You understand, even without using the body, how you can consistently hit with topspin and get the ball to go in and still make adjustments to get the ball to go higher or lower, or higher with a lot of spin, or lower with more drive, meaning that I wouldn't get as low under the ball and pull through the ball a little bit more rather than pulling straight up on it. Now we're getting to the bigger part. Get ready. So this first part of our swing creates momentum, meaning that when we start dropping the racket, if I drop and relax, the racket kind of just wants to go forward. Just hold the racket here, and I'm going to hold it with my 2 fingers just like this, and watch what happens if I just let go. And look what gravity's going to do. It's just going to start naturally dropping the racket. Now, if I add to this by, as the racket's getting down here and pulling, it makes it go even faster, and I don't have to do anything, okay? So how do we use this? Well, it's very important to understand that the big muscles are what we want to use to hit the ball. And because the big muscles are what we want to use to hit the ball, we want to start using our hips. And by rotating our hips, this is actually going to rotate the racket or pull the racket through contact. And what I mean by this is just by turning the knee, if I go to that same position we talked about earlier, where we drop the racket on the calf and I do nothing but turn my kneecap in towards the court, look what happens. I'm just turning my kneecap. I'm not actually pulling the racket. So this creates a lot of explosive racketed speed that you can use, okay? And then once we combine this with the drop and then timing this correctly, now you have access to so much more power on your one-handed backhand. But let's stick with this for 1 second. Now here, you're gonna feel this thing happen. As I turn, I almost have to create some tension not to let the racket go forward. We don't wanna do that. I want you to feel that as you turn, you can let the racket go up. And we've already talked about our steering and how the swing should be. So if I turn my knee, we're gonna lift that racket. Turn my knee, relax and lift that racket. Turn my knee and relax and lift that racket. So this is a great drill just to get you to get used to turning the knee. Now, what you want to make sure you do is not over-rotate your hips when you're hitting your one-handed backhand. What this means is, in this exercise, I'm totally okay with you right now turning your knee, and you can see almost how your hips are facing forward. But in reality, what we want to do is only ignite our hips, meaning that we don't need this full knee turn. We need just a little bit, because that's going to send the energy up to the arm. And a great way of getting a sense for this is what I call doing the sandwich. The sandwich connects your swing with your body. So we can do this, and that's just the swing. We can do this, and that's the swing and a little bit of the body, but there's not a super good connection. And to clear up that connection, I like to take my hand here, or you can take a towel and just stuff it under the arm. And what'll happen is, when you sandwich your hand under your arm and do the swing, or just do your knee turn, look what happens. There's a real good connection of where my hip moves. You feel that energy pull the racket here, okay? As you lift it away, you get a little bit more disconnected from it. By having this a little bit tighter, this really adds this good connection here. And what we want is our hip to turn to the angle of contact. So contact's here, my hips are facing here. I'm gonna turn it to the angle of contact and then relax. And you can really see now, I'm not even doing the swing yet. I get a lot of racketed speed that you should be able to feel that connection with. Now, if we start putting it together, what we want to do is feel that drop, and as the racket gets to here, we're going to pick up where the momentum is leaving us or taking us and speed that up. And so it'll look like this. Okay? Now, one important thing, actually two important things right here, is that left hand needs to come down with the racket. You'll see all great one-handed players, almost said two-handed players, you'll see all great one-handed players hold onto the racket and release it right here by the pocket. The final stage of having a bigger and better backhand is this, is you have to set up your wheels. One of the biggest things I see that players get confused on is what locks off the power that you can gain from your hips, which is this toe. By having this toe facing sideways, it really locks this hip up. You can feel like even if you turn here, it's almost like a collision against your knee and your hips. Simply by opening this toe a little bit, and you'll see players when they're stepping out to hit a one-handed backhand, you'll see this toe open, that it now creates release, okay? That we can release this tension. And that's how you want to set up your wheels, that once you move out and then you finally step, we're gonna step at an angle to create this release. And now you have all the secrets you need to create a huge one-handed backhand. What that means is making sure that in this position with our left hand, we're gonna drop the racket and pull. And notice what's happening. We broke this all down and we're starting to put it back together. We have the steering where it's gonna drop, creating that momentum. And as it comes down, you're gonna turn that knee to the contact and let that energy flow up and out with the finish looking this way. And this is the secret to having a bigger, better one-handed backhand. This really allows you to explode on the ball and create a ton of racketed speed. So now let's go do some drills to really cement what we've just worked on and what we talked about, so you know how to implement it when you're on the court. Now it's time to do some drop feds, and you can do this by yourself on the court. This is why I wanted to do a lot of these drills, because it allows you to do it by yourself. And then if you have a ball machine or you have access to someone who can feed you balls, this is a great way of starting off. So what you want to do really quickly is just reorient your body with what we just talked about. And so we want to set up our wheels correctly, which means we have this toe slightly facing inside the court. From here, what we want to do is first work on our swing. And that means just dropping the racket to the calf position and pulling up. I'm not even going to worry about the lower half. And so this just makes sure that we have our swing going exactly the way we want it. One quick note for when you start to feed yourself balls is to make sure you toss the ball in the air. Too many times I see players trying to work on their game, and so they drop it and they're racing to do the shot. And what that does is you don't have time to actually do the correct technique. So what we want to do is toss it high in the air. So what we do is we have plenty of time to make sure we have the correct technique while we're doing the shot. And so again, from right here, I'm using my left arm. I'll use my left hand to toss the ball nice and high in the air. And notice how I'm focusing on lifting the ball. Okay, I'm not even focusing on using the rest of my body. I want to make sure that you have the correct swing or steering going down. So the key to doing this is making sure that the racket head is dropping below the ball. As you see this, I'm getting the racket head under. So you can do drop feds, but if you have problems where you feel like, man, I'm not getting under the ball, what I do recommend is do a simple drill where you toss and swing under the ball and up. Swing nice and slow as I'm tossing, I'm swinging under the ball, and look where I'm checking my swing to make sure that the strings are facing this way at contact. Again, one more time, toss, under the ball, and up. This really allows me to slow down and hit the right points when I'm trying to do my one-handed backhand. Now, the next thing we want to do is start incorporating our hips a little bit. And so I really recommend, before you just go out and whack the ball, because that's the first thing we want to do, is actually do the exact same drill, but we're going to incorporate our legs while we're doing it. So I'm going to have my racket back, I'm going to toss it nice and high, and notice how I'm now turning my knee and my hips are facing towards the contact. And this is a great drill that you can come out and it makes you get under the ball and swing up. As you're swinging up, another great way of thinking about it is just getting the edge to almost come up and hit the top of the ball. Generally, you'll miss the ball or miss the edge of the frame, which is totally fine. But you want to do that, just get that feeling of getting under and coming up. If you do these drills enough where it feels really comfortable, you don't have to think about it, then you can start incorporating hitting the ball. And so what I'm going to do is, again, get set up, toss it nice and high, and I highly recommend when you're doing this not to try to hit the ball like 2 inches over the net. A lot of times, because if we're focusing on how high we hit the ball over the net, especially if it's coming close to not going in, we start getting focused on the result and we lose focus on the technique here. So try to hit the ball maybe 10, 20 feet over the net. Don't worry about that right now. We're worried about the technique, okay? And this is the way to start off, making sure you're training the right way to get the results you want. Okay, now you have a front and behind view, because I want you to see exactly how high the ball is going, and then I want you to see, as I start incorporating more racketed speed and acceleration, how it looks, okay? So again, we go through the same drill where I'm gonna toss it in the air, come up, and now I'll hit the ball. You can see how I have a lot of shape, a lot of height over the net. It's really done on purpose, because from here, I wanna start working my way down instead of working my way up. Too many times we come out to the court and we're trying to like whack the ball really hard and it goes over the net, barely skimming over the net. But I think it's really important to start off really high with a lot of spin, and what you do is slowly bring down spin if you want to add more penetration, or slowly close the racket face. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, but now I'm going to start speeding up my racket. And as I really start up means simply accelerating on the ball. What's happening is the difference between I have that separation between how much and hips, I start and then pulling when I get down to here, you can gauge it between 0 and 10 of how my first one's probably like a 5 and a pull. My hips to pull the racket here when I turn, that explosiveness right here. So you can see the difference between this one, and then if I want more power, not a lot of acceleration, more, and then it goes up to a 7.
So TennisCon's my favorite event I do each and every year because it creates raving fans all over the world writing in telling me how much of an impact this event makes on their tennis game and how much they're improving. So what I want you to do right now is run over to tenniscon8.com, sign up, and get access to secrets that you're not going to find anywhere else on the internet. We'll see you guys on the next video.
Really make sure that as you're using, aren't opening up. Now, a couple notes and important things, that mistakes you might make, is that when we start hitting, we start opening up our hips too much. What happens is you'll start shanking balls off this way. And this is a sign that our hips are facing forward too much and not having our hips facing that contact and sending the energy through the ball. And that's super important. I really recommend that you slowly build your way to where you're accelerating more and start working on kind of the high ball that's 10 feet above net with a ton of spin. That drives opponents crazy, and that's exactly what you want to do. And then, as you get better, you can start closing the racket face. The difference between my ball going 10 feet in the air and going, let's say, a couple feet over the net is just simply at contact where my racket face is going to be based on the amount of spin I'm going to hit. And that takes practice just to feel exactly where you want that racket face to be. Just make sure as you go out and do this, you take each progression slowly and you work through it, and you're going to have a bigger and better one-handed backhand. I really enjoy teaching this, and I'm so appreciative that you took the time to watch this presentation to help your backhand. I hope you enjoy the rest of TennisCon, and make sure if you have any questions, let me know.